On behalf of Erie Arts and Culture, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first annual Arts and Agencies Week, a virtual event designed to explore the ways that arts are being leveraged to raise awareness of systemic issues, amplify underrepresented voices, and generate creative solutions to societal change. Funding for Arts and Agency Week was provided in part by Erie Community Foundation through their Shaping Tomorrow grant program. My name is Marty Wachuku, and I'm a community organizer with Erie County United. Erie County United's mission is to address our community's inequalities that stem from racism, bigotry, and classism. To heal, we believe to heal and move forward as a community, we must move with intention as we plan a future for all, especially for those who are most vulnerable in our community. At our organization, we bring together people and organizations to run issue-based campaign, grow grassroots political power, and build a sustainable progressive movement in the city of Erie. Today, I have the privilege of introducing Dr. Charon Hribar. Dr. Sharon Hribar is the Director of Cultural Strategies for the Cairo Center and co-director of Theomuseology and Movement Arts for the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. She holds a master's in divinity from Union Theological Seminary and a PhD in religion and society from Drew University. Over the past 16 years or 15 years, Dr. Sharon has been dedicated to the work of political education, leadership development, and fostering the use of arts and culture for movement building with community and religious leaders across the country. Through her work with the Poor People's Campaign, Sharon has developed cultural resources to help leaders on the ground integrate arts and culture into their organizing work, including We Rise Movement Songbook and the Just Seeds Poor People's Campaign art portfolio. Dr. Charon is with us today to speak about their work with the Poor People's Campaign. The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, is building a broad fusion movement to unite poor and impacted communities across the country. From Alaska to Arkansas, the Bronx to the border, people are coming together to confront the interlocking evils of systemic racism, poverty, and ecological devastation, militarism, and the war economy, and the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism. We understand that as a nation, we are at a critical juncture, that we need a movement that will shift the moral narrative, impact policies and elections at every level of government, and build lasting power for poor and impacted people. This presentation is streamed through Zoom, as well as Erie Arts and Culture's Facebook page and YouTube channel. The session will conclude with a question and answer section. If you have questions, please type them into the text box. At the end of the presentation, I will read the questions to Dr. Sharon for answering. We thank you for being present with us today, and we hope you enjoyed the presentation. Now, let's hear from Dr. Sharon.
Thanks so much, Marty. It's great to be here with you and with everybody on the Zoom today and on Facebook. Thank you, Erie Arts and Culture, for inviting me and the Poor People's Campaign to come and share about our work. We really appreciate the chance to put out what we're doing, and I've been getting a chance to tune in and learn from others that have been in this week, and how important arts and culture work is to the kind of movement building that we're doing. I wanted to just start off today with a song, as we're here talking about arts and culture, giving a chance to do some arts and culture as well. And I'll say a little bit more about the campaign, the arts and culture work we do, share some videos and slides. But I know it's helpful for me to always ground myself in the cultural work that we do. And it's also one of the things that we do in our work organizing is often beginning any meetings and spaces offering up music. And so this song I share with you comes from the 1968 Poor People's Campaign, actually. If folks haven't heard about the 1968 campaign that Dr. King and others started, to address the interlocking injustices that Marty was just lifting up, the injustices of systemic racism, poverty, the war economy, and we've talked about now ecological devastation. Really bringing people together to address these injustices. This song was written then by the Reverend Frederick Douglass Kirkpatrick and Jimmy Collier as they went around the country and recruited others to join with the movement, and to go to Washington and lay forward and lay bare the reality that people in the richest country in the world were suffering these injustices, and especially the injustice of poverty in the richest nation in the world. So with that, I'll share this and then say a little more. It's called Everybody's Got a Right to Live. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. 'Cause everybody's got a right to live. So as I said, that song was written in 1968, but we took that song as a way in the Poor People's Campaign to teach the history of the campaign and the need to reignite that campaign even more so now. It was a campaign that was unfinished. And in 2018, when we launched the Poor People's Campaign, we wanted to be able to think about ways to bridge that history and to think about what it would mean to reignite that campaign today. And if you hear that song, it was one of the songs we took up as we launched the campaign in 2018. We launched with 40 days of nonviolence, moral direct action in 40 state capitals around the country. And it was a song you would hear every Monday as folks went to their state capitals. It was one of the songs that was lifted up as people were willing to put their bodies on the line in the form of civil disobedience to suggest and say and demand that everybody in this country has the right to live, that we have the right to health care, that we have the right to clean water, to affordable housing, quality education, and so much more. And this music of singing together was really a way to profess that together and to take up, this campaign in this important way. Since that time in 2018, as I've mentioned, we're both a national campaign, but we're a state-based campaign. And so we've continued to organize in 40 different states across the country. And, continuing, we started with that 40 days of direct action, which direct action is a major component still of the campaign. We've also continued to hold town halls and hearings. We've had, a lot of canvassing for both midterm elections, as well as the 2020. We had a major, mobilization to get people out to vote in our We Must Do More, Mobilize, Organize, Register, and Educate campaign. We've done a lot of deep political education work in our states to raise consciousness among our groups and to be able to see how our issues are interconnected. And, we've really, at the heart of this work is really being able to think about how we integrate the use of arts and culture, that it's not something that we do on the side, but it's part of the heart and soul of this movement. Throughout history, music and arts have always played an essential role in movement building, of bringing people together, of connecting people, of building our commitments, of building our courage. And that's something we take seriously in the campaign. And before I dive into that, I just wanted to share a quick video with you all, just to give you a sense of who is the Poor People's Campaign if you've not had a chance to encounter us yet. Just to get a flavor. And this video is actually from that launch of the 40 days of action. So you can see a little bit of what we look like in motion here. So I'm going to share my screen. It might just take me 1 second here. And hopefully you can see this.
Our brothers and sisters are sleeping on the streets. For a country this rich to have so many people poor, it's immoral and it's wrong.
Our backs are against the wall and we got no choice but to push.
To follow that breaking news in Albany, where a large group of protesters have moved into the street.
Washington Avenue between City Hall and Lark Street closed down.
Protesters with the Poor People's Campaign of Indiana.
2 o'clock on the East Coast, 2 o'clock in the middle, 2 o'clock on the West Coast. A wave, and the historians tell us it's never happened before.
Our communities, Muslim communities, who have joined the Poor People's Campaign, you can count on us.
Our democracy is in trouble.
Our democracy is in trouble.
And we come to demand.
And we come to demand.
Second warning. Because it's crucial that we make ourselves heard. No one is listening. We write letters, we make calls. No one is listening. So we gotta find a way to make ourselves heard.
We are the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And we are here. We are poor. We are clergy. And we're here to say to our nation's capital and to the highest court in this land that everybody has a right to live. Everybody has a right to learn. Everybody has a right to love. Everybody has a right to living wages. Everybody has a right to vote. Everybody has a right to thrive in this society.
Everybody say, ah!
I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. Freedom fighter, and he taught us how to fight.
The poor and their clergy. We read Article 6 of the Kentucky State Constitution that says we have a right to free assembly.
We are demanding that we stop the war on our poor.
There will be a movement that will break through the con and bring people together to save the heart and the soul of this democracy and this world.
So I hope you can get a little feel for the spirit of this movement and see a little bit of the arts and culture even poking through in that video. But as I said, you know, this campaign is a campaign that is national and state-based. We are bringing together people from all different racial backgrounds, from all different ages, from all different sexual orientations, religious backgrounds, regions, and it's a lot to hold. You know, it's not easy necessarily to bring people together, and a lot that society tries to do is keep us divided and keep us siloed. And so, you know, the work that we do is about building a fusion movement. And what we mean by that is bringing all of these things together. And that is where real power is built, when we can bring folks together across all of these divides, especially those that are most impacted by these issues. And one of the things that helps us to do that is the work of arts and culture, of being able to be together, be able to experience each other, to lift up our cultures, to, you know, use the arts and culture work to both kind of hold us in that space, as well as to be able to start to create together in a shared vision and to lift up the principles that we're fighting for together. And so, you know, how do we do that? And I want to share, you know, one of the first ways we really did that in the Poor People's Campaign, as we began to think about the launch in 2018, was from the beginning to think about how do we integrate artists and cultural organizers from our communities across the country into the strategy of building the organizing of the campaign. And we pulled together a gathering actually in February. The campaign was going to be launching in May of 2018 on Mother's Day, which is actually when the first campaign was launched with leaders from the welfare rights movement on Mother's Day, lifting up the role of poor women. And in February that year, we actually brought together over 100 artists, musicians, visual artists, documentarians together in Raleigh, North Carolina, to be able to start to think about how do we intentionally build the work of arts and culture into the campaign. And myself and Yara Allen, who's out of North Carolina, are the co-directors of the Theomusicology and Movement Arts work in the campaign, alongside of a lot of the artists and cultural organizers across the country that have been involved, and being able to think very intentionally about how do we, integrate arts and culture on a spiritual, ideological, and tactical level into this work. And so, with the Theomusicology and Movement Cultural Arts gathering that we did in 2018, we brought folks together from over 32 states at that time. We have more states now. And we really tried to think about, how do we, if our goals in this campaign are to shift the narrative around poverty and its interlocking injustices, if our goal is to build power, how are we going to put the core messages out? How are we going to put the values and principles out of this campaign? And how would we use, the visual arts and the music and the use of photography and video and all of these things to help to do that work? And so we brought people together for 4 days to learn about the history of the Poor People's Campaign and why we are being called to reignite it today. We, made art together. We learned songs that we were going to be using in those 40 days of action that people would take back to their states and teach other people those songs, create more art with them. And it was a way to start to build a visual unity across the country, that people could feel they were part of something, as well as what we like to talk about in the campaign is start to build one band, one sound. And so that is literally on the musical level, but also on what is the message that we're putting out, this shared message of a campaign that is fighting for our rights and fighting for our lives. And so I just wanted to share one more video, again, just kind of setting the tone and giving you a sense before I dive into some specific examples of the cultural work. And this is actually an example too, one of the songs that folks learned that they would be able to use in direct action from that gathering. And you can kind of get a glimpse of the artists that came together in that moment. So one more screen share here.
I am not afraid. I am not afraid. I will die for liberation, 'cause I know why I was made. I am not afraid. I am not afraid. I will die for liberation, 'cause I know why I was made. I am not afraid.
So to give you a little bit of the spirit of the campaign. And that song I just want to lift up was written by the Peace Poets that are from here in the Bronx, where I live as well. And you can see some of them were in that video, Luaya and Frank Lopez. And, they wrote that song as a song that can be used in direct actions. And when we're confronted with moments, that are definitely tense moments, to remind ourselves of the courage that we have and the goal that we have of liberation for our people. But really, in that video is a good example, I think, of what we were working on there in that gathering. And you could see the art that was made that weekend. We actually participated in a march in Raleigh that week with local organizers. All the artists that were there from around the country participated and brought out the art, and were leading songs in that march as well. But really as a chance to prepare folks to go back around the country. And they were part of their coordinating committees. The way the Poor People's Campaign is structured is there are coordinating committees in all of the states. And people have different roles on those coordinating committees, especially during the direct action moments. Some folks were working on the logistics of direct action, working on the legal teams, working on fundraising, working on including faith leaders and religious communities, and incorporating the arts and culture was one of the roles that folks are playing within those coordinating committees. And so the folks you saw represented in that video are people that are doing this work all over the country and more. Obviously, we couldn't bring everybody together, but a representation of folks that are doing this work. And even the video was one of the documentarians that was with us, videographers, several of them, were able to pull together footage from the weekend and make different videos for the work moving forward so that we can continue to teach those songs. I'm actually going to move to a slideshow now just to share a few other things here and give some examples of the ways we're using arts and culture in the campaign. And again, how we do this is always alongside what are the activities and actions of the campaign itself, and how does the arts and culture work really fit in and ground that and amplify that work. And so I'm gonna skip through these first few slides, which I've already done. But yeah, one thing I just want to lift up is, again, that from the get-go, we always think about including artists as leaders and organizers of the campaign, and not just support and decoration. Sometimes in organizing work, we might at the very end, folks will call an artist to show up and perform or something at an action. But we really see the value of artists as part of the campaign, including because many artists are, this is our campaign. Many of us are part of the 140 million that are poor and low income in this country, of the, folks that are struggling to get healthcare, struggling to get, decent and affordable housing. And so, it's not something that we are just alongside this campaign, but we are really part of it. And we bring the skills that we have as artists, as others bring the skills and gifts that they have. But seeing that we have to think about it that way and not just kind of call folks at the last minute, that we really think together and think about that the strategy the campaign develops as part of the arts and culture strategy as well. So one of the ways that we use arts and culture in the campaign is through our Justice Jump Off choirs. People probably have heard about and know the history of mass meetings within the context of the civil rights movement. This is a tradition we continue within the Poor People's Campaign. We've had mass meetings all over the country, oftentimes the evening or day before we do a major direct action, as a way to bring people together, to share testimonies, to lift people up and to help to establish our relationship with one another before we go out and take direct action together, as well as to empower us to go and have the courage to take direct action together. And so these are just a few photos from our Justice Jump Off choirs. And what that means is, the way we use music, especially in the activities of the campaign, is a very participatory style of music. And so often you will never see, one of the theomusicologists, which are our song leaders. And we talk about theomusicology as a very intentional way that we're thinking about the music, of grounding ourselves in a tradition of movement music that has grounded movements historically, spiritually, and ideologically, and knowing how to set the tone in the moment. But we don't do that alone. We sing with people. And so, it's never just a choir performing or a singer singing by themselves, but we use these Justice Jump Off choirs as a way to really engage the whole community that's gathered in these mass meetings, which can be hundreds to thousands of people. And often invite, some of the participants to come up and come up with the song leaders and to help lead the rest of the community in song. And they're a really important way to, think about breaking down. I think a lot in our culture today, we've in some ways been taught to consume art and that we can't create it. And I think this is a way to remind ourselves that we are all creators, right? And that we are all participants, and to really help to think about how do we build community. And throughout history, music has always been a way to build community. And I think we sometimes lost that kind of role of community singing together. And so the mass meetings are one space, and these Justice Jump Off choirs are a way that we do that and have folks kind of join us in singing and lifting up our voices together. And, the music that we do, similar to the one that I started with, they're often, they're movement songs, and movement songs are meant to be collectively sung, and they're meant to be somewhat, easy to follow, easy to pick up. The words should be interchangeable, and songs that people can all really gravitate to and learn and sing. And we use these songs in the mass meetings, and we also take these songs out into the streets. And as a way to get our message across when we are taking action in the streets together, to help people hear, the message that we're putting out, as well as to continue to sustain us during those direct actions. Another way we've actually been able to teach these songs was through creating a movement songbook, the We Rise movement songbook. And it's a resource that's on the Poor People's Campaign website. If you go to the campaign website and go to the arts and culture section, you can actually download this resource. It's an online resource. It's meant to be used, meant to be, shared. And there's both lyrics that are part of the songbook, but there's also, if you notice, there's a tab that says listen or watch, and that'll give you either an audio track or a video of the song to really learn and hear how it's sung. And there's over 70 songs. We still need to actually update and add some more, because there's both songs that historically come out of movements, but also songs that have been written in this time for this moment. And so another way to learn these new movement songs and to have people all over the country be able to share them and sing them in the streets is through this movement songbook. So it's a great resource. And we, and pulled together a lot of creative energy around this, and folks that are doing movement music in the street. And if you've ever been to an action, I think, there's a lot of actions going on these days where music is being used. Sometimes there's a lot of chants, I think, that go on, whose streets are streets, this is what democracy look like. And those are really powerful. But I do think there's an added value of singing together in this moment. And if you've been to an action where music is used, sometimes it's not easy to start, right? Because people have gotten out of the habit of singing together. And so it's one of the things, we've really taught throughout the campaign by teaching these songs in our meetings and in our communities, to be able to sing together, and to be able, again, to use really simple songs that people can pick up, and you don't have to stare down at a sheet of music or listen to it 1,000 times, but to have some key song leaders that know the songs that can really lift up and call out the changes in lyrics, and the power of that when you're out in the street. Is you can really feel that, especially there are moments, if you're doing direct action, that can get tense, that can get disorienting, and music is a really powerful way to recenter ourselves, to ground ourselves, to remind us what our vision is and what our goals are. So going back to that song, I Am Not Afraid, it was a song that could be used in a moment if things were kind of going a little too chaotic. If a song leader would start that, it was a collective breath people could take together, and really just be present, and set the tone and remind us of what we were doing, especially as people were getting ready to risk arrest in this direct action campaign. It was a way to think about why we were there together. Another way we were able to, teach these songs and learn them all over the country and have people singing the same songs was through the use of music videos. We actually created videos with folks that were gathered, in that original gathering that I was talking to you about. And these were 3 of the key songs that we asked people to lift up as they were going to their state capitals for the 40 days of action. And we created almost like a karaoke style video where it would have the lyrics and the tune and actually the history of the song, because we think it's really important to learn the history of these songs too, because these songs come out of struggle. And so we always want to teach the history of our songs and the music, as I did, inviting you to learn about the history of the Everybody's Got a Right to Live, connected to the original Poor People's Campaign, to know that we are part of a lineage of people that have fought before us. And as we write new movement songs today that come out of our struggles today, we continue to tell these stories, to use music and the arts to tell the history of struggle. And so these videos would start with the history of the songs, as well as moving into teaching the songs, and people could share these in their local meetings. And so by the time we got to the 40 days, people knew them and could just, go out and sing them. And it's not a Poor People's Campaign event or meeting, or if you don't have music, it's really integral to how we do things. One other example I wanted to share, in this digital moment was, we were originally going to be scheduling a huge mass mobilization last June, and then COVID had hit. And so we had to think creatively of how do we continue to do the kind of arts and culture work that we do in this moment where, a lot of times arts and culture work is very hands-on and about bringing community together. And we wanted to continue that, but we had to think about some of the virtual ways that we could do that. And so one thing we did last spring to help still get the word out about what we turned from a in-person mass march and meeting was a mass digital meeting on June 20th. And to get the word out about that, we decided to launch an Everybody's Got to Right to Live song challenge. And we had artists from around the country, some of our theomusicologists, some of the artists that groups that we work with in the campaign that are supportive of the principles and demands, do their own version of Everybody's Got a Right to Live, to kind of popularize this song for more audiences, and when they would post it on social media to let folks know about the June 20th mass meeting that would be digital, which we ended up having over 2 million people join us for on June 20th to hear the testimonies of folks across this country and what's going on and the demands that we were calling for. And I think this was a really powerful project because we took a common song and then ask people to really take it and make it their own. And you heard kind of the version that I shared at the beginning is the original version. I just wanted to share one version from one of our artists in New York, Jen Dog Lone Wolf, to give you a sense of the way that people then, took this song and kept the feeling and spirit and principles of it, but then, kind of took it and made it their own and shared it. I'm going to share one more video here. To give you a sense of the way that different artists interpreted this music.
Everybody got a right to live. Everybody got a right to love. Everybody got a right to dream. Everybody got a right to learn. Everybody got a right to live. Everybody got a right to love. Everybody got a right to dream. Everybody got a right to learn.
I live to dream hope, and hope is my best friend. I hope I live to dream past what I'm learning. I dream of times full of reciprocal gives. I love us getting better at this life we get to live. Poor folks really do give all we got to give. Allies and friends, parents and the kids. Reality is 2020 make you see better. Well, 2020 80 so the road from the go-getters. Unemployment go get it, except the undocumented. They work twice as much to keep the U.S. on top of it. Politics, best believe you know we are stopping it. With common unity, create community, no blocking it. Love to all my poor folk, resurrect your city. City of hope, foundation nitty gritty. No pots to pity, epitome of what they did to we. But literally, yo, we can shift it spiritually. Connect.
Everybody got a right to live. Everybody got a right to love. Everybody got a right to dream. Everybody got a right to learn. Everybody got a right to live. Everybody got a right to love. Everybody got a right to dream. Everybody got a right to learn.
So you can just get again a sense. There were all different versions, from Jen Dog's version to a group with Sienna Seeley that did a kind of Latinx version, and yeah, kind of the gamut. We had banjo playing, all kind of things. So just a way to think about, we're coming from different communities and different styles, and this is what fusion organizing is looking like. We can see that in the music as well. And so I just wanted to share that example. And we actually have a whole playlist of different versions of that song, which we've continued to be able to actually use in our digital meetings as we've been virtual over the many months of COVID. So it ended up serving many purposes of being able to create those music videos, and being able to lift up the different artists that participated in that Everybody's Got a Right to Live song challenge. I'm gonna go back to the slideshow. I wanted to switch a little bit over to looking at some of the visual arts work, and then I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. But I know when Marty was originally introducing me, she mentioned one of the projects that we took up was the Just Seeds portfolio. Sorry, I'm just trying to share my screen here. Marty, can you let me know, do you see the slideshow presentation?
I can see it.
Okay, great. It was giving me a little trouble on my end. So these are just a few samples from the Just Seeds poster project, and political posters have always played an important role in social movements. And again, as we were launching this campaign, we wanted to think about different ways we could do political education in our communities to lift up, some of the key slogans and principles of the work. And so this portfolio, which you can see online as well, if you go to the Just Seeds website or the Kairos website, has 25 different prints from different artists that are part of the Just Seeds Art Collective, which is a group of visual artists that are here in the US and Mexico and Canada, as well as some other campaign artists that participated. And we created this portfolio that was based on different speeches from Dr. King, as well as some other movement leaders, and some of the principles and kind of core documents of the Poor People's Campaign, as well as we work at shifting the distorted moral narrative. So within this portfolio, we also have a few representations of some different biblical passages calling for justice. And we were able to, create these prints that have continued to be used across the campaign, and send them out to the different states so that they could use these posters during their political education sessions. We also sent along the digital files so that people could continue to print them or use them for to be backgrounds as flyers, or actually to print screens for screen printing. And so people, when they would do art builds as a community building event, could use these different images and actually tell the story behind them, maybe even do a reading that, one of these come from, for instance, the militarism, racism, poverty, and pollution. While those are the core, kind of evils that the campaign lift up, it also comes from Dr. King's Beyond Vietnam speech. So when we pair this with the political education session, people can read that speech, look at this image and even do, a screen printing exercise and have kind of patches or things to take home with them and to wear out in the streets. And so it kind of becomes a multi-purpose activity, where it's a way for the visual arts to be part of the political education process and a powerful way to deliver the message of the campaign. We also, as you saw probably in the videos, the role that the visual arts play in creating the banners and flags that we take out into the streets and often hang up in our mass meetings. We could, have people just print things at a local print shop, but I think there's something, again, about how do we create community through participation and the creation of the arts is really part of our organizing strategy of the campaign. And so we often host art builds when we're leading up to different activities of the campaign. And you can see, these are different pieces, some that were created together when we were in a national space, and others that around the country have continued to create in their states. And you really see, I think, when you look at a photo like this and see the different states and the visual identity, right, of the campaign. And again, how do you create that when it's not just people kind of sporadically coming together? But I think what this represents is the real organization that is there and a shared vision that we're trying to create together. And so, while there's room for, building and having different visuals and different styles of art, there are some through lines that we try to create with the colors, with, some of the messages, and then have different interpretations of those through the visual artwork. But really we lift up, doing kind of this community art building together, and seeing, the power it is for people to kind of come together and make art together. And then, having that to take out to the streets together is very empowering, I think, to be proud of the work that you're creating together. And really embodying the messages that we're creating. And one more thing you can notice, and some of these images, is the songs and the visual arts we try to lift up together, oftentimes to echo those messages. So, the lyrics will often, end up in some of our visual artwork as well, to kind of reinforce, the messages and make those connections between the music and the visual arts work that we're doing. And you can see, it becomes a community building space. These are just some of the different art builds that have happened around the country that people have held doing screen printing and banner making, and people have made puppets and different things. But just as a real way to get people involved, it's also a great way to get families involved. We think it's really important to get families involved together in the movement, and create space for children in the movement. We talk about children aren't in the way, they are the way. And so, art is another way that we can really integrate that into the way we do organizing in the campaign. And, again, we've done these all over the country. We also always carve out space in our national gatherings for people to learn new ways and skills of doing artwork together. So this is just one example of a gathering we held last year. We were gearing up for the June 20 mass march that ended up going virtual, but we had people from all over the country come together, and this is some of the art they made, and were able to take back to their states together and replicate and learn. We had actually kind of skills workshop for a few days ahead of the convening, where some of the leaders from around the country came together to learn how to do the screen printing, to learn how to to do banner making, and so that they could take those skills back to their communities and create art together. I just wanted to offer a few more quick examples, and then I'll stop. There's always so much of just some of the things we've done virtually, because we are in this virtual space. And so I mentioned the music piece. Another thing we did last year was create virtual banners, since we couldn't do art builds together, where we had, if you notice in this picture, people would do one letter of a message. This was something that one of our artists, David Solnit, out of the Bay Area, came up with, to be able to build art together even while we were virtual, that we would each create a letter, and then we would submit that letter. And so folks would organize themselves in a collective of 26 people and submit their letters, and then we would put it into this form of a virtual banner. And we use those virtual banners to kind of share the messaging and share to get people to come to the June 2020 gathering. And so we had that actually like over 1,000 people that participated in that virtual banner making, and getting their friends and family to participate in it as well. In this virtual space, we've also, or not virtual, but actually physical space during COVID, how do we do that safely? Another thing we've done are these car caravans, so that people aren't having to be exposed to COVID, but we've used the artwork as a way to continue to show our connection and messaging of the campaign if we can't necessarily be on the street fully together. And so you can see these are some of the images of the car caravans we've done throughout this year, people going to their state capitals and also on their bikes, lifting up the messages of the campaign, and doing that in a safe COVID friendly way. And then I'll close with this. Just I wanted to share one example. We do a lot of visual arts and music. We do have some of the dancers of the Poor People's Campaign that in this virtual space also decided to think about how do we engage dance. And so one of the ideas they came up with in the Poor People's Campaign, if you watch any of our events, a core part of what we do is lift up the testimonies of folks that are impacted by the issues that we are fighting for. And the dancers of the Poor People's Campaign decided to take some of those testimonies. We had created shorts of a lot of the in-person testimonies and made 100 videos leading up to the June 20th event, 100 days out. And they took those videos and made a parallel dance piece to kind of embody that testimony. So I'll share one quick last video and then I'll take some questions, but just wanted to give people a flavor. There's a lot of other examples, but this is some of the way that we're working to incorporate arts and culture into the Poor People's Campaign. So last share.
And it's gone on far too long.
Now more than ever, I feel the fragility of just being okay. My partner and I are part of the millions that are just one emergency away from losing it all. Meanwhile, our government uses this crisis to fatten the pockets of those who can't fit any more bills in their already overstuffed pockets, bailing out the ones with already a big safety net. And us, we get scraps. But I refuse to stay quiet. I'm a volunteer organizer with the Poor People's Campaign in Wisconsin because I know there is enough food, enough clean and safe water, and definitely enough money for every human being, not just in this country, but in our planet, to live with dignity. So join me in fighting to create the society we all deserve to live in. Thank you.
And we won't be silent anymore.
Okay, I'll stop for now and see if there are any questions and comments. I know want to give a little space for that.
For those of you in the Zoom chat, and if you're watching online, please feel free to throw in your questions into the chat function in the Zoom or in the chat function on Facebook, and we will pick them up and read them out to Dr. Charon here. While we wait, I just wanted to, some of the things that you were saying, Doctor, really were hitting for me. So I'm a community organizer myself, and we've done actions here and there. But right before the summer, right before COVID, the Green New Deal Coalition did a march, and they had drums and other musicians, and it was something I hadn't really seen during my time here in Erie, and it was really powerful. So when you were talking about like music being central to like the feeling, it really inspired me to think about that when we get back to in-person events.
Yeah, we had in New York State, we did an action in Albany, and we worked with one of the groups that we work with in New York City is called the Rude Mechanical Orchestra, and they often go out for different actions across the city. But they came with us to Albany, and we'd been rehearsing with them for a while. Like they've learned different songs from the Poor People's Campaign, and so in Albany, the way that the Capitol is set up, there's like a really long hallway that leads down to like the entrance that you have to go through the screening to go into the Capitol. And so we had this procession with, the Rude Mechanical Orchestra and all of the people that were there for the action and going to visit their senators that day. And it was really fascinating to watch just people in the Capitol building. It was very, in some ways, like they're just like, what is going on? And like people would come out from the different, like there's like stores and stuff in that area, and I think it just takes people a little bit in their moment, like, oh, something different is happening, right? To see this kind of procession of folks that were singing and chanting together with this like orchestra, that street orchestra with brass band and whatnot, kind of marching down the hallway, and everyone, it's interesting to think about how we disrupt in that kind of way, in a creative way, with music, and what kind of tone. I think one of the questions is what kind of tone you want to set. Sometimes that was probably a more like joyous, like triumphant kind of entry. We've also done an action on Memorial Day in the Capitol in DC, where we did just a very a soft mantra of we remember you for all of the people that have died in the wars, and so we sang that, and a lot of those state buildings, the acoustics are quite nice actually to sing in. They really echo through the chambers, and so just having everyone sing that repetitive mantra, we remember you, over and over, you could see people kind of coming out of their offices and being like, what are people doing here, and so it's interesting to think about that.
I also really admire the transition from, in person to online with the virtual banner and, the music traveling across the country and getting changed in various ways.
Yeah, we were like, what are we gonna do? But creatives are always creative, right? So able to shift and fold when we need to.
All right, we have a question from the chat. I cannot help but notice the diversity present in the populations you work with. What methods and channels do you use to mobilize individuals and share information? Can you also share insight as to the process of developing your demands?
Yeah, those are two questions that go well together, I think. So one thing I will say, I'll actually start with the second part, and then I think it echoes kind of the first question as well. The Poor People's Campaign didn't emerge from thin air. Both, it's based on a historical campaign, and some of the folks that are involved today were part of that original Poor People's Campaign, especially one of the groups that, has been a mentor to me, as well as has been, really pivotal in lifting up the campaign today, is the Welfare Rights organization. And so we have the women that founded Welfare Rights have been part of the campaign today and continue that on. But really, the work of the Poor People's Campaign, while we launched in 2018, was work for decades that was going on to form this campaign today. And so we've been working with, grassroots communities all over the country that were fighting, in Detroit against, water privatization and water shutoffs, that were working against the school to prison pipeline in Philadelphia, that were, working against homelessness and the growing population of folks that are facing, evictions and long-term housing affordability issues with the National Union of the Homeless. That was a movement in the 80s and has been reinvigorated today. And so, that's who our network was that came together to form the Poor People's Campaign. We didn't get the idea to form the Poor People's Campaign. It was coming from this long-term work of folks that were doing, that grassroots work in lots of different ways, and came to see like it wasn't enough to do any one little piece of that. While it's all really important work, that we needed to be able to form something bigger and build more power together. And so, the way that the campaign came together was actually those folks that had been organizing in different ways together for years, coming together, knowing that it was going to be the 50th anniversary of the Poor People's Campaign, and using that moment to really reignite and launch this kind of current formation of the campaign. And so it wasn't from scratch. It was based on lots and lots of years of organizing, and lots of, political education work together, of knowing kind of what we're up against, and the kind of power that we're up against, and the kind of power that we needed to be able to build. And I think, again, going back to this principle of building a fusion movement, of looking at this moment and understanding that we're still often organizing in our silos, whether it be issues, whether it be, race, whether it be, regions, like we're often and then pitted against one another, whether it be by the powers that be or by a nonprofit industrial complex, if you will, and funding. There's lots of layers to that, right? And so how do we actually move against that and really come together? And so that's how we have been able to, really build this kind of diversity. It's not from scratch, it's from people that have been doing this work for a long time, and trying to figure out how to do this and learning from a lot of, in some ways, failures that have become successes now, right? And obstacles, maybe not failures, but obstacles, including in the original Poor People's Campaign. There was a reason it didn't continue, and it was intentionally attacked. And Dr. King, we would say, was intentionally killed for the work of trying to pull together that Poor People's Campaign. And so, that's one of the things. And how do we do that? And if you watch any of the events of the Poor People's Campaign, again, when you hear the testimonies of folks that are testifying about what's going on in our communities, those aren't folks that are just coming out for the day. They're folks that are part of this campaign and are doing this work for lots of years, right? And so, we are constantly, trying to continue to build leaders in our communities, and leadership development is a huge part of the work that we do in the Poor People's Campaign. Through political education, through organizing. And so, whether it be in Aberdeen, Washington, which is a small rural white community that is, facing huge problems of homelessness, and actually being attacked by the far right as well for coming together with other folks, to communities in Lowndes County, Alabama, where they're dealing with raw sewage on the ground, to folks in New York City that, we're dealing with housing eviction crises and all of this. And it's really like we've used the channels of already existing, like organizing and bringing that together, and especially through political education, through taking action together. And again, through the use of arts and culture, those are ways that we can actually bring those communities together and really build deep relationships. I think one of the important things is if you meet folks from the Poor People's Campaign, they know each other. They're not just coming together for an event. Like, we know our families. Like my new little one who's 2 months old, like he has a huge extended family in this campaign, right? And that's part of how we build is building really deep relationships. And the other question of the process of developing our demands is connected to that as well, because the demands come from these struggles. They weren't something that we just decided, but they were already existing demands that folks have been fighting for. So like the work that we do around, the fight for 15 and a guaranteed income, right? The guaranteed income comes for the work of the welfare rights folks. They were fighting for that back in the 60s, right? And we're fighting for it today. The work of 15 as part of that moving to a guaranteed income, comes from our relationship with the Fight for 15, that we've had a longstanding relationship with, especially the group in Raise Up in North Carolina, but also SEIU on a whole, and the Fight for 15. Our demands around water come out of, again, demands that have been happening on the ground. We've been working with the folks in Detroit and in Flint for years. And so the need for, fighting back against water shutoffs, like that demand comes from that community. And so, the process of developing the demands has been from, is pulling together all of the different fights that are going on that are part of this campaign across the country. And recognizing it's not a piecemeal one or the other, like we're fighting for all of this, and we need all of it. And, and we can actually achieve all of it. And I think I mentioned this, if some folks had tuned in early, one of the ways that we've shown that it's possible is, we've had kind of a series of research that we did to kind of put forward those demands. One was an audit that we did back in 2018 to say, the original campaign started in 1968. Where are we today in 2018? And we said, these are the issues, right? Based on these fights that are going on in these different communities, and things are actually worse today than they were in 68. After we looked at that, we said, so what can we do about it? Do we have the resources to actually, take all of these things up? And when we did the budget, the moral budget, and worked with economists, as well as community leaders around the country, we found that, yes, we actually have the resources in this country to actually meet all of these needs, to pay for a quality education, to pay for healthcare, to pay for, housing. Everyone, we have more housing stock in this country than we need, than people that don't have housing, right? And so, that was part of the process to then say, and these are our demands, because we know what's wrong, we know what's possible, these are the demands we're fighting for.
We have one last question here in the chat, and then we're going to close for the day. What insights or suggestions do you have for community that has been historically siloed? How do you begin to play as one band, one song?
Yeah. Silos are not easy to break. It's intentional. It's part of the history of this country. And I think that historically, this country, the way that those in power keep their power is by keeping us siloed. And so I think one of the ways that we have used to break those silos is holding space together. But in holding space together, I think the political education about that history is really important, actually, for people to learn and know of times both of why we've been siloed, as well as when people have been able to come together, and to show examples of that, and to show how a lot of times the movements that have come together have been directly attacked, right? Because they've come together. If we look at something like the original Rainbow Coalition, that was developed with Fred Hampton, the Black Panthers and the Young Lords and the Young Patriots that were coming together, they were an effort that was directly attacked for trying to do that work. The Poor People's Campaign, the original campaign, was attacked for trying to, bring people together. And when people can see that history, the intentional ways that those in power have tried to keep us divided, I think it becomes, understandable. It doesn't take away all of the challenges that we still face today of bringing people together and figuring out like how we can be in that space. But learning that history, I think, is really powerful in understanding, why it has been, and learning the history of struggle. And then I think the other piece is being able to tell our stories. Testimony and storytelling has been a huge part of the Poor People's Campaign. Again, if you look at any event we do, we are storytellers, because we have to be able to know who we are, and know the struggles that we come out of. And the reality is that, most people in this country are struggling. We're not talking about, when we talk about poverty, a marginal portion of the population. This is part of the narrative we've been trying to shift. Like, we're talking about 140 million. That's like, half of our population is dealing with this, or we're one paycheck, one healthcare crisis away, one, unemployment away from, being in that position. And so that's a lot of people. And we have to understand it might look different, and it might, we might have different slight levels of that, but for the most part, like, we're all being screwed, right? And so we have to hear what that looks like and be able to share those stories, and then understand what it is that, like, what's possible. Again, like, in this moment, those at the top made trillions of dollars in the middle of the, coronavirus pandemic, right? And in the middle of this crisis. And yet, how many folks in your community are facing evictions or can't put food on the table because they're not working? That's a disparity and an inequality that we have to address and understand how it's impacting, different communities in different ways. And we have to tell those stories and then be able to see and relate to one another, that a poor farmer in Kansas can relate to, someone in New York City or in Philly, right? Like, that it might be different a little bit, looks a little different, but we're still all struggling, and we have to tell those stories to understand who the real enemy is, right? And how we can kind of come together and actually take that on and make the demands that we know are possible.
Well, I'm going to bring us to a close here. Thank you, Dr. Charon, for being with us today and presenting. I hope that the individuals joining us on Zoom and Facebook took a lot from this conversation today. And hopefully we here in Erie can start beginning to break out of our silos and learn some lessons from what was shared today. To the attendees present and those joining us today on Facebook, we thank you for tuning in.
Do you mind if I close us with a song, Marty?
No, go
Kind of how we do.
Yes.
So one other song I'll share. This comes from my co-director Yara Allen in North Carolina, and it was a song written in North Carolina at an event where someone was giving their testimony, and she was like, no song that I knew already fit. So this one came, it emerged in the moment, and it's called Somebody's Hurting My Brother. And I'll just do 2 verses and we'll close out for the day. But thank you all for being with us. And I do hope we can continue to connect. This movement is about all of us. And we do hope to be able to be with you again. Somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. I tell you, it's gone on far too long. Somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Did you hear? Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. I tell you, it's gone on far too long. Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. And we won't be silent anymore. And we won't be silent anymore. Thank you.